Hi everyone, this is the Sensory Integration Assessment Guide Part 2, and today I am planning on starting with the tactile system and first going over over-responsive to touch or tactile defensiveness. So this is a modulation concern. I am a school-based therapist right now. So when I am looking at this in the school system, I am always going to also give either the SPM, which is the sensory processing measure, or the sensory profile. So this is super important to give to teachers and to the parent so that you do have an idea of what they're seeing in the classroom as well as at home, because that gives you a lot of information, especially about just over responsiveness or under responsiveness to a sensory system, in this case touch. So that's always the first thing that I try to do before I even grab the kiddo. If I can get the SPM or sensory profile back from the teacher and from the parent, it gives me a really nice idea of what I need to take a look at and what the problem areas are for the child. And the other thing I really like to do before I really get started and start assessing myself is to really get a lot of observations of their functional performance. So that means I really want to see them in the classroom and see what they're doing, how they're interacting. Especially if you're assessing the tactile system, you really need to see how they're interacting around other people in the classroom, and really get an idea of what they're able to do during recess, what are they doing during circle time, just within the classroom, how are they doing with things like art projects, or just sitting in the classroom during circle time or at their desk. So those are just general functional performance observations that I really like to see before I am assessing a child. So I get an idea of what they're looking at in school. And so when I'm starting the modulation part, or really assessing that tactile defensiveness or over responsiveness to touch, I included, this is part of my assessment guide. So I have this area in there so that you can really know what materials you're using. So when you write up your assessment, it's right there. And to make sure that you really are looking at over responsiveness to touch. So, providing a couple different types of materials for the child to just kind of play with and explore. And you kind of see what is their ability to respond to those textures or materials. And see if there are signs of tactile defensiveness. And of course, everyone has some sort of level, I think, of tactile defensiveness. So really what we're looking at is the child able to continue with the project? That's really what we're looking at. Is there some sort of adaptive response to the tactile input, that they're able to continue with the project even though they might be slightly tactily defensive? Or are they able to move on? Maybe they recognize, oh, someone touched me, and they might even slap their arm a little bit, but are they able to move on from that? So we might see little signs here and there, and of course you would mention those types of things in your assessment, but really in the school-based system, we're really taking a look at what is their ability to access and actually be able to continue with the activity, because that's what we're really targeting. So that's just kind of something to really focus on when you're assessing. Is their adaptive response. So beyond that, I really like to see if light touch is tolerable. So during the assessment, as I'm doing, playing with these types of materials, is the child going to be able to tolerate light touch or just any of those materials? So I take a look at that, and if I see that the child's like immediately slapping or pushing against the area that was touched, those are definitely signs of tactile defensiveness. And then can they attend to the task and continue to attend to the task if I just lightly touch them or bump them? There's one clinical sort of observation where you just, gently kind of touch the back of their neck, kind of rub gently and see, and it's, you're not letting them know that you're going to do that, to see how they tolerate something that is more spontaneous, right? That would be similar to if a peer all of a sudden accidentally bumped them or touched them. How are they reacting towards that? So they might notice it and they might say, "Oh, you touched me." And then they move right on. So then in that case, they're able to continue with the activity. If it's becoming a functional problem where they are tantruming because they were just touched, or they're unable to continue with whatever activity that you're doing because they were just gently touched, or they're becoming so disorganized from it that they really can't attend, they're just unfocused, they're running around everywhere because you've just touched them, then those are definitely signs that you want to look at. So here also, it's important especially for kids that are tactily defensive, to really check on what their emotional responses are and what's their irritability and mood, because typically if they have very, very severe tactile defensiveness, there will be a lot of emotional responses going on. These are the kids that if, something is just not going their way because they do lack control of their environment. When you're tactily defensive, any sort of, tactile input, whether it be the wind or whether it be, just, something on your feet or something in your hands, it's noxious to them. So they tend to be a little bit more emotional or irritable because of that. They're trying to control their environment so that their nervous system feels the best that it can. So that's, usually we do see that kids with tactile defensiveness are definitely a little bit more irritable or anxious or, moody because they're uncomfortable in their body. So another thing that you really want to check is also the child's attention to task, because their attention to task will most likely be affected if they are truly tactily defensive. They have a difficult time sustaining their attention because, basically their nervous system is worried. They are worried that something will, push them or something will be uncomfortable. That's their nervous system. And so, their attention is always somewhere else because they are anxious and worried. So you will have to make sure that you take a look at their attention to task and see if that tactile defensiveness is really affecting their attention. And the last thing that I wanted to mention is, are you seeing that the child is seeking intense proprioceptive input? So the reason why a kid that has tactile defensiveness would be seeking intense proprioceptive input is because they're trying to help themselves modulate that tactile input in their nervous system. So in order to help the nervous system be in a better state of arousal and a better state of regulation, that proprioceptive input is there to help modulate that. So a lot of kids that are tactily defensive, you will see that they're jumping more, or they're doing a lot of crashing types of activities, pushing, pulling, heavy work on their own, because that's what helps their nervous system. Because that over-responsiveness to touch is really noxious to that nervous system, and that intense proprioceptive input helps to make their bodies feel better. So that's really important. That's an important thing to just monitor and just to take a look at. These also might be kids that are always walking on their toes. That's a really intense form of proprioceptive input for the body. So they might be walking around, the house on their tippy toes, and the reason why is because their over responsiveness to touch, or perhaps another sensory system. So I hope this was helpful. That's a lot of information. And if you have any questions, please email me at jnipediatricot@gmail.com, and I can answer those questions for you. Thanks, everyone.